Hello, Marlins fans, and welcome to another edition of Big Fish Small Pod. As always, Big Fish Small Pod is presented by MPT College Consulting. You can check it out at mptcollegeconsulting.com. And Marlins fans, we have another brand new episode of my series where I'll be conducting interviews with those people in the media outlets to discuss about new Marlins draftees. And today, from Purdue Baseball, the voice of Purdue Baseball, Mr. Kyle Charters. Kyle, it is great to have you on here today.
Hey, appreciate it. Glad to take a couple of minutes to talk to you about a former Boilermaker.
Yeah, let's get to it. Starting catcher Connor Caskenette, drafted by the Marlins, recently just signed his contract for a $100,000 signing bonus. Talk to us a little bit about Connor for maybe those Marlins fans who may not have watched Boilermaker or Big Ten baseball last year.
Well, a Canadian who came to Purdue a couple of years ago and really I think has been an extremely consistent player, especially at the plate. He's had a good bat, good power, hits for good average. A doubles guy who hits home runs as well. I mean, he's sort of been an excellent middle of the order player for Purdue. And I think the thing that really stands out to me is just that consistency. I mean, there was never really a moment in his 2 years in West Lafayette where it even seemed like he was in a mild slump, right? I mean, there was just a certain level that you expected from him every day. And, I think that's what really stands out to me, that just a consistent performer. It was really helped Purdue, I think, these last couple of years, especially this last year, really make a big jump forward.
Yeah, and, for Connor, as a catcher, one of those premium positions, one of those positions where it seems like you're doing multiple things at once. And for him, defensively, how would you mention maybe some of his behind the plate? Because maybe helping out with the pitching staff, that rapport he has. Just how was he more on the defensive or maybe even the pitching side of the catching position?
Good. And I think that's an area where he made a lot of improvements from the beginning of his first season last year through this year. Now, he got off to a little bit of a slow start last year because he had a little bit of an injury, got injured in the first practice in Texas before the season opening series down there in Sugar Land, Texas. And so was slowed up a little bit at the beginning of the season. I think that hurt him a little bit behind the plate early last year. But once he started feeling good, and I think once he got a little bit of experience at the D1 level, man, he really settled in and was great defensively. I've said before that I thought he was one of the more improved Purdue players for a 2-year player that I've seen in the last 20 years, because it just seemed like he skyrocketed defensively, and even won, I think, Defensive Player of the Year for Purdue in his first season. So it just shows you how, some of maybe those hiccups early in the season last year, he really, once he got settled in, was really solid behind the plate. Good arm. I don't know if it's like the best arm ever, but a good arm, covers the territory behind the plate well, seems to work well with pitchers. The one thing that was super interesting that he had to tell us, I've never heard anyone say this before on our podcast, was that he had trouble catching lefty pitchers. And I've never heard that before. I don't know if it was just an experience thing at his JC or back home that he just didn't have a lot of it with him, or what the situation was, but it took him a while to sort of get used to lefty pitching. And I've never thought about that before. I've never played the position before either, but I've never heard a catcher say that they struggled with just, what arm the guy's throwing with. And, a little bit of the arm slot, the pitch angle, it just was coming from a different spot. I never noticed that, like, calling games, but he told us that. And, it must have improved a lot over his 2 years with that. But it was just interesting to hear him say that because it's such an unusual thing. But really, I thought by the time he left Purdue was just really solid. Another area where he was just super consistent in everything that he did.
Yeah, and when you came into Purdue, you mentioned I was doing a little research. Came in from a JC, came in already veteran of the game. How did he help out maybe some of the younger guys? Coming into Purdue at 21. How did he instantly go in, become a leader, and maybe if so, did he help out some of the freshmen, the sophomores on the team?
What's a little bit wild is he came into a position where Purdue had two veterans catchers last year. So while he was a little bit nicked up at the beginning of the season, those other guys filled in, and you'd sort of wondered whether they weren't just going to stick there, for that season. But I think his bat was so good that Greg Goff had to find a way that once he was healthy again, and it didn't take him long to get him back in the lineup. So yeah, he, especially this year, I think, really grew into that leadership spot because he was the guy. The other two had departed, one a graduate and one a transfer. So, by the second half of last year, he was the everyday guy. And then this year really carried the load behind the plate, played through injury, had a little bit of, I think it was a hamstring, might've been a quad. He was not for maybe a weekend in a critical series. He was not 100%. And played through it. You could tell just watching him, run the bases that he was probably 70 maybe %, but stuck it out in what was a big series. Actually had a pretty good series, and that can't be easy to play when your lower half is a little bit nicked up when you're a catcher. But was able to fight through it. I think that just shows what kind of leader he was for Purdue.
Yeah, and at Purdue, how do you believe maybe he was, or maybe how the results came in when he maybe faced off against maybe those bigger teams, those higher quality teams? Because now going into pro ball, he's going to face guys who maybe they were the Saturday guys at maybe a Wake Forest or something like that. Just how was he in terms of maybe offensively against maybe that stiffer competition?
Yeah, I don't have the stats in front of me, but my feel is, again, just that consistency, that it didn't really seem to phase him, the level of competition that he was facing. It's not like, some guys you sort of feel like, they're feasting off the midweek pitching or in the preseason they've hit, 10 of their 12 home runs came in the first 3 weekends when you're playing against seemingly lesser teams. It didn't feel that way with him. I don't have the numbers in front of me, but pretty consistent guy. It seemed like he was good for, a hit a game, a double, a home run a weekend, that kind of thing. And just a really, really consistent guy, no matter who he's playing. And just, fundamentally good in terms of being able to hit the ball the other way. Advanced runners. He didn't strike out a whole lot. So, having productive outs and, just giving his team an opportunity, even if, he wasn't able to get a hit himself.
Yeah, and a little bit off the field, maybe how was Connor, maybe your time around with him, or maybe when you talk to some of his teammates or the coaching staff, what are some ways that they would describe Connor maybe a little bit off the field and how he was as a teammate or as a person?
Yeah, I can't claim to be super close to any of the guys as I get a little bit older, having done this for a long time. But I know that he's a good-natured guy. I think that he's a somewhat humorous guy. I think his name came up. We quiz some guys occasionally on who, maybe he's got the best sense of humor on the team. He and Purdue's third baseman, Joe Stevens, seem to really connect at times and be buddies and sort of humorous and lead the team in a way that kept everybody relaxed. So that's my impression of him as well. Just a guy who enjoys the game, takes it very seriously when he needs to, but does a good job of keeping his teammates relaxed, keeping the pitching staff relaxed. I think all those things at that position are pretty important.
And maybe the last question I have about Connor is just, overall, how well do you see him fitting in the pro ball system and professional baseball? You mentioned how great he was offensively, and it's always great when you have someone going to pro ball as the reigning defensive player of the year at the catching position.
Yeah, I mean, I think he'll adjust well. I mean, he's a guy that loves the sport. I think that, when you do advance up levels, it becomes a job, and you have to put in all the work that's necessary. We've seen plenty of guys from the Big Ten and things who you sort of know are very talented players, but maybe are not putting in the kind of work you need to make it as a professional. And my impression of Caskenette is that he's going to do all those things that are necessary to make it. It's very hard, obviously, getting all the way up to the big leagues. But I don't think if he does not make it, it's not going to be for lack of an effort. I don't think, which is it's a good thing. You can't sort of train that, right? You guys either want it or don't. And so he seems like a guy who not only has some talent, but also has some want. And that's a pretty good combination.
Well, that's a perfect way to end it, Kyle, here on Big Fish Small Pod. I want to thank you for coming on, and maybe where can some of these people find you on Twitter or podcasts if there's maybe any connection between Marlins and Boilermakers?
Kyle Charter 79 on Twitter. You can find me there. A lot of Purdue baseball talk, a lot of Big Ten baseball as well there, a lot of Purdue sports in general. I do some other random stuff, including today filling in on an afternoon radio show. But do appreciate the time, and thanks for having me, and go Fish.